misogynistic and transphobic are not insults, nor are they stereotypes or generalizations. Rather, they are facts about the way we are socialized in a Western society and in most other societies.
Who's talking, you or him?
Me.
I warn all of you, never, never, never. You will not only lose your mind, you lose your soul.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings, this is Burn Power, the Anadromist, coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia. And in How We Got Here, number 11, I mentioned the Matrix and Gnosticism, which caused a few people to ask a few questions, like, tell us more about Gnosticism. So that's what we're going to do today. And, in fact, this is going to be more of a discussion. To do a deep dive in Gnosticism would take a long time because it actually involves quite a bit of different groups, different periods of time, going all the way back into ancient history, and many different manifestations of it in today's world. But I want to talk about why it seems to be coming back and what we can do to understand that and to perhaps prepare ourselves for even more odd Gnostic trends coming up. So, why is Gnosticism coming back? I think there are different forces at work. I think the hippies and the New Age movement unleashed one particular strain of Gnostic ideas back into the world. I also think films like Star Wars or The Matrix have fostered another brand, and The Matrix is particularly important in this. And probably the most important reason why Gnosticism is coming back is technology, particularly digital technology, particularly our relationship to the screen. So, what is Gnosticism, I suppose, would be the big question. Very simplistically, and we'll explain it more as we go, Gnosticism sees an extreme split between spirit and matter. Spirit is good, matter is not. Therefore, in order for us to achieve the level of spirit, we need special knowledge, or gnosis in Greek, which is where the word comes from. Just a quick word to keep us straight here. Agnosticism has nothing to do with Gnosticism. The just means not knowing. So a person who says, I'm agnostic, is basically saying, I don't know. I don't know if there's a God. I don't know if, what to think of the President of the United States. I don't know, if Walt Disney is an evil corporation. I don't know. I'm agnostic about it. But Gnosticism, is something very, very different, as we'll see. Where does it originate? We have to go all the way back into ancient Persia. And most people will say it starts somewhere there, although there are hints of a similar idea even as far back as the Scythians. But in ancient Persia, they had a religion called Zoroastrianism. And in Zoroastrianism, you had a very hard dualism. You know, the black and the white. You had the black god, the dark god. Some of this goes back in the ancient Slavic religion as well. The good god was named Ahura Mazda, and the bad god was named Angra Mainyu, or Ahriman. Later became Ahriman. Angra Mainyu, Ahriman. Eventually it mutated into that. And so we call it Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. And they were equally, they were equal in power. And now, I'm not going to do a deep dive into Zoroastrianism. It is worth looking up. But essentially, these two were equal. Now, according to what I know about Zoroastrian religion, of which there are a few adherents still surviving in the Middle East in little pockets, the good is eventually supposed to win out. But it's a dualism, one side and the other. Now, how does that work its way further into the future? Obviously, Zoroastrianism isn't something most people think much about. And yet, somehow, Gnosticism is related to it. I think we can see it like this. Consider the case of astrology. Obviously, astrology is with us today. Western-style astrology comes to us through ancient Babylon. Ancient Babylonian religion is what we call astrology today. And it survives. How does it survive? Well, interestingly enough, the Persians attacked Babylon and overwhelmed their culture, but the Babylonians had a little gift for the Persians, and it was their astrological religion, which then the Persians adopted. Alexander the Great attacked Persia and eventually conquered it. And they gave him a little gift as well, astrology. Astrology then percolated through the Roman Empire, eventually, which then went through the Middle Ages, which then kind of surreptitiously was part of people's superstitions and such, and there will be people who claim that it's absolutely accurate. This is a religion. It is Babylonian religion, astrology. Well, not only did Alexander the Great, through his conquest of Persia, get the little gift of astrology, he also got the little gift of Zoroastrianism, although it didn't stay named Zoroastrianism. And to understand why, we have to understand what's called the Hellenistic period. Hellas was the ancient name of Greece. So the Hellenistic period was that period after the conquest of Alexander the Great, when the Greek civilization dominated particularly the Eastern Mediterranean region. And that include Egypt and Syria and what we now call Turkey, what was then called Asia. and in this, now you've got influences coming from Persia. You've got influences coming from ancient Egypt. And one of the key factors of the Hellenistic period is that it is extremely syncretistic. Syncretism means a blending of different religious ideas. So one of the things that happened during that period was, of course, all these different peoples had different gods. The Greeks had their gods, the Egyptians had their gods, the Persians had Zoroastrianism, the people who were in the Assyrian area had astrological stuff, and they all started getting a bit blended together. Of course, people would try to keep their religions separate, but this age tended to blend them together. Not only that, there was the arrival of what's called mystery religions. One of them we know well today is called Mithraism. But one of the things about these mystery religions is we don't know exactly what they were because they were a mystery. And you needed a special initiation and a special knowledge to get in. So, and these were often religions that were accompanied by various sorts of ecstasies or transgressions or mysteries or sacrifices, and some of them undoubtedly quite extreme, some of them involving orgies, some of them just simply religious. Very complicated. Now, into this world, something seems to be brewing here. And there are different theories as to how Gnosticism originated. But for my money, the best one is that it is a variant on ancient Persian dualism, moved into the Hellenistic period, and then kind of merged with these other ideas, including the mystery religion ideas, and then eventually becomes this Gnosticism. But we don't really see Gnosticism until we see its effect upon Judaism and eventually Christianity. So, what is the Gnosticism that we're eventually going to see that disguises itself almost as Judaism and Christianity? In fact, there's a whole strain of thinking these days that I think it's Elaine Pagels is one of the ones most responsible for this, that because there is a connection between Christianity and Gnosticism back in the first century, the theory has been going around that the real Christianity was Gnosticism, and that this other thing was this oppressive, patriarchal religion that crushed the purity of Gnosticism. Well, anyone who's actually done any actual research into Christianity knows this is a really spurious argument. But from this argument, you get such things as Dan Brown's works, which are completely Gnostic. The Da Vinci Code, Gnosticism. And in fact, essentially what he's doing is saying through that is that, the real Jesus was this Gnostic figure, and that other thing that the Catholic Church is doing, bad. But this is in fact something very, very old. What was Gnosticism back in around the second century is when you really start to see it. It's, again, the spirit and matter split in thinking. The Jews did not separate spirit and matter the way the Greeks did. Also, you see the influence of Platonism in this. But the Jews did not separate in their thinking spirit and matter like this. The Jews, for instance, they didn't think of the soul as being something separate from the body. The soul, in fact, you were a soul. You didn't have a soul. Having a soul, that language already kind of has a body-soul split. But in ancient, the nephesh, which is, if I remember correctly, the Hebrew word for soul, was what you were. It was your entirety, which included your matter. Matter was made as good. The Jews thanked God for their matter, for their material, for their food. Matter was good. Now, there is a fall, Adam and Eve. There is evil. But it doesn't change the fact that there is goodness in matter. The Gnostic ideas say, no, matter is evil and corrupt. Matter brings us down. All things consumed in matter bring us down. And only spirit is good. This is very similar to Plato's ideas of the perfect image. Like, for instance, we could think of a perfect chair, and that all chairs are basically poor imitations of the perfect chair. But that's, and to put that kind of spirit matter discussion into Judaism is to make a big mistake. And in fact, when Christianity gets too far away from those Jewish roots, it starts to take on very odd forms. And the furthest that it gets away in heretical terms really is Gnosticism. The idea that you can get special knowledge, which will what? Here's the question. How did the Gnostics see the world? The Gnostics saw the world as there is a God way, way up there, away from us, in a separate sphere. Then there is us, way, 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 way down here, in this dirty, mucky material world. And you can't get from here to there. It's no way. So, now, in the Bible, you have, in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, and the letters and the Gospels, you have the idea that God is indeed separate from us because of our sin. But that separation can be bridged through the sacrifice of Christ. But in the Gnostic view, Jesus isn't, this all gets very bizarre. There was a guy named Marcion in the Roman era. And Marcion came up with an idea. You can look up Marcionism in Wikipedia if you want an introduction to the subject. Marcion came up with this idea that God of the Old Testament wasn't the real God. He was just the God of this thing, this mucky earth thing. You see? So, Jesus came from a further layer up above, a further level. He was, and here's the word they use, demiurgos, or as we call it in English, a demiurge. A demiurge is a godlike being who bridges the gap between these layers. And in fact, one of the signs of this sort of Gnostic version of Christianity is, in fact, the belief in many, many angels helping us do this. In fact, once you start getting, the Bible mentions a few angels, but once you start getting into, angelolatry, the worship of angels. In fact, I believe it's in Colossians, the letter of Paul to the Colossians. He says, watch out for people who are talking to you too much about angels. See, because the Gnostics borrowed the talk about angels and put it as these demiurgos, the demiurges who go between these places. So Christ ends up being someone from a higher realm come to us to bridge us to the next realm. But you have to have the special knowledge to know that. I just gave it to you. Good luck. So the real God is so far above. He's the alien God. He has nothing to do with us. But if you find the special knowledge, you can eventually get closer into the next realm, maybe 2 realms, maybe 3 realms. And in fact, what the Gnostics did was they read Paul's letter and the Gospel of Luke almost entirely as Gnostic texts. They had more problems with Matthew, who really emphasizes the Jewish stuff, and more problems with John, who's going off on a different tangent that they didn't really like. But Paul and Luke, they liked, and they put it into their Gnostic Gospels. By the way, you will hear people talk about things like the Book of Enoch, or the Acts of Thomas or the Gospel of Thomas. And these are all Gnostic texts, either coming from a Jewish or a Christian perspective. And one way you can tell is that they talk about the mysteries and how we can get into them further. They emphasize that God is within you, and if you could only do what? Learn the right code and get in. Whereas the Bible's emphasis is that anyone can approach God through the finished work of Jesus Christ. So, now there were other groups that started to adopt these Gnostic tenets, and there have been quite a few groups through history. Some people have said there were no Gnostics, and the reason they say that is because there's so many different groups of them. It was, for some reason or another, a mode of thinking that seemed to just absolutely give itself to new groups, because someone else would learn something new and get a group of followers and start a new cult. So it lends itself to all sorts of new groups learning new things, a bit like the different groups within the New Age movement. And in fact, that's no coincidence. They are, in fact, very much part of the same thing. One group was Manichaeism, and Manichaeism was started by a Persian, Mani, and he emphasized more this total black and white split between God and not God, black God, dark God. So sometimes you will hear the phrase today if someone says, gosh, I hate all the communists. And someone else might reply, well, that's really Manichaean, meaning that's really black and white, because you're just seeing them, who aren't you, as completely black, and you're in the white category. So Manichaeism, and these are all things, I mean, I could spend a lot more time talking about them all, but I'm trying to give you a sense of this, the larger picture of Gnosticism. There was also the Jewish Gnosticism eventually becomes called Kabbalism or Kabbalah. And it is a whole series of understanding the ancient Hebrew scriptures through special codes and special knowledge. And it's different than simply being orthodox. And it's quite complicated. These things are all quite complicated. Later in the Middle Ages, you have groups like the Bogomils, who I believe were out of Croatia or Serbia, and they left behind some very strange tombstones with this figure with one large hand. Then there are the Cathars. I saw an episode of Rick Steves' travel videos recently where he was talking about how the Cathars were persecuted. And, you know, wasn't it terrible in the Middle Ages that these heretics, they were called heretics then because they were heretical to all normal Christian doctrine, that these heretics were persecuted, and why? They were just peace-loving people who were Christians. No, they were Gnostics. And what do I mean by Gnostics? I mean that they believed that matter was bad, so they were vegetarians because they believed the vegetable world to be better than the meat world. And they were, they essentially were ascetic, and they didn't believe in procreation, which is something very interesting that these Gnostic groups, many of them choose, is because you see, if life on earth is really bad, why would you want to continue procreating? So Gnosticism ends up being very kind of oddly anti-natalist, anti-procreation, anti-family. Is this beginning to strike any chords in you? It should, because we're coming to the home base eventually here. There were also, of course, astrology is loaded with a kind of Gnosticism. it's the special knowledge of the stars. If only you could learn it, you could control your destiny. Tarot cards have a lot of Gnosticism to them, and they're symbolic, using their symbols to divine the future. Anything symbolic that you use to divine the future, that's a form of Gnosticism. In fact, most occult teaching derives from some form of Gnosticism. Sufism is the Islamic form of Gnosticism. And then there is also Hermeticism, which is based on the idea that there are secrets inside of things. And now the interesting thing about Hermeticism, though, is it really sees matter as important, but as containing these odd mysteries inside of it. Again, these things get really complicated. Interestingly enough, in the early church, it was Irenaeus, in his book Against Heresies, who really outlines so many of the features of Gnosticism. And in fact, I do not have that book, but I'm ordering it, because I feel like I really need to go back and read the early church fathers to understand what's coming now. Because Gnosticism never went away. It went underground. And in fact, some of the strangest forms of Gnosticism showed up in Russia. And again, there's not one kind of Gnosticism. You can't generalize with these things. There's so many, it's like this huge panoply of styles of worship, styles of cults, thought forms, ideas. All of these would take ages to discuss, but I want you to see the Gnostic underpinning to the whole thing. So in Russia, you had one group called the Chlisti, or the Chlists, who, the word Chlist means whips. And they were known for whipping themselves. They were also known for whipping themselves into ecstasies. And one of the things that's often whispered about these groups, and it's very common, is that they all indulge in orgies and really strange things. And it's really hard to know, just as it's hard to understand what the mystery religions were, it's hard to know exactly what's going on. Were they really indulging in these like mass orgies and stuff, or was it all just what their enemies said? I'm not going to go any further, but that's the kind of, people would get who weren't in these groups would look at them and go like, what are they doing? But we definitely know that the Chlisti whipped themselves and had these kind of ecstatic meanings. They also weren't really into procreation, but not nearly as much as the group that followed them, called the Skopsi. And the Skopsi actually believed in self-castration. I'm going to show you a couple pictures here. One of the what the men and the women did. They called it the baptism of fire. Some men might just lose their testicles, others might lose everything. And the women would have a mastectomy, and probably a clitorectomy if that was on the menu. So, interestingly, when you look at the pictures, does this remind you of anything? Kind of does me. It kind of says there is a general frame of reference here that seems to be very powerful. What is going on? But then you have other forms. The Freemasons. They're definitely a Gnostic group. You need secret knowledge to get into the group. Now, a lot of people have these whole conspiracy theories. In fact, the Bavarian Illuminati was another Gnostic type group. And now there's the kind of the joke version of the Illuminati. And it really was a joke version, started in 1969 by a couple of guys who were Discordians, meaning they were there to just almost create chaos. And so they threw this article into a letter of Playboy. And from that, it just mushroomed. And now people see the Illuminati under everything. My feeling is that all the conspiracy theorists are Gnostic too, because they think they have the special knowledge. See, this stuff is devious. It gets under everything, this whole idea of the special knowledge. There have been so many cults from there's a book by this guy Darkan Darul called Secret Societies, and you read about, whether it's the assassins in the Islamic world or the thuggies in India, or they all have this weird thing about the secret knowledge. It's like, and there is this continuity, and there seems to be a passing of the concepts, the idea of secret knowledge. But again, I wouldn't lump these groups all in together. I'm just pointing the underpinnings. I would never say that the Hlists and the Freemasons and the Bogomils were all part of the same group. That would be ridiculous. They're not. It's just that this Gnostic thing seems to breed cults like wildfire, cults and what can I say, perspectives, like wildfire. And so you can see it's been underground. The Rosicrucians, Christian Science, the whole Mary Baker Eddy thing. Mormonism has a lot of Gnostic underpinnings to it. What are those peepstones that Joseph Smith had? It's amazing how much this goes underneath everything and burrows. By the time you get into the 20th century, Carl Gustav Jung wrote books on Gnosticism. He was not only fascinated with it, he was a bit of a Gnostic himself. His ideas eventually go all over the place into things like the hippie movement. I mean, not directly, but then again, in the hippie movement and the Beats, you have this idea of special knowledge. And the special knowledge in the hippies was LSD. If you just take this, man, you're going to really see everything. Later, the hippie movement kind of turns into the New Age movement. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area during the early 70s, and there was 50, 60 different cults in the area, some based on Christianity, some based on Sufism, some based on Sikhism, some based on Judaism, all in the San Francisco Bay Area. Most of them, not all, but most of them were based in some form of Gnostic thought. So, then there's another curious form of Gnostic thought. So remember I was talking to you about Marcion, and he said that God of the Old Testament was, he wasn't a good God. Because he created this shit we call matter and earth. And those people who really like that God and worship that God, you know what they're called? They're called Jews. And guess what? That's the spiritual underpinning for what happened. See, there were people like Madame Helena Blavatsky and her Theosophical movement, who resurrected the Hindu idea of castes, and she coined the term in a new light, the Aryans, and she said that she talked about the different root races, and the Aryans were the highest, the closest to escaping into the next realm. They were actually children of a realm above this earth, the Aryans. Guess who are the people at the bottom? Give you a hint. They follow the God of the Old Testament. And so, in America today, you will hear neo-Nazis use the phrase mud people, because they're people of matter. And so, in the SS and in Heinrich Himmler's views, those Jews, and Hitler's, of course, those Jews would taint you. You see, because the Aryans belong to a higher class, and these Jews belong to a lower class. And in fact, in some views, Lucifer is a higher class. He's a light bringer. He's not all the way up, but he's higher and comes down, whereas Jesus is maybe higher than Lucifer. This all gets complicated. And the idea of special hermetic occult knowledge always carries with it these things underneath it. It's amazing how this works. So the Holocaust is essentially a product of the Gnostic religious imagination. And that's not a joke. In fact, Benjamin Boyce just interviewed a French professor named Bruno Chaouat, I believe is the proper pronunciation. And he works in Minneapolis, but he's French. He studied all the French philosophy. And in fact, let me play you a clip from that where he talks about the relationship of the Nazis to Marcion, to anti-Semitism.
With the Gnostics, right, is that they were first and foremost opposed to the Creator. And I mean, again, that's I'm summarizing, and I'm actually all right. So I'm reducing and subsuming all those different trends in ancient Gnosticism within a couple of features, but it's much more nuanced. Okay, yeah. But let's say that some of them were very opposed to the demiurge. Some of them even, if you can see Marcion, the Gospel of the Alien God, it sounds like Raélien or new cult, new age, title. Yeah. Gospel of the Alien. And it is in a way, because New Age has been very inspired also knowingly or unknowingly by Gnosticism. And so the idea for Marcion, how do you pronounce in English, was actually to decouple the Hebrew scripture from the New Testament, because the Hebrew scripture was all about evil and bad, and the bad God and the evil God, and the New Testament was all about this alien God, Jesus, who is not from this world, right? So there are some scholars, I'm thinking of Gershom Scholem in particular, who was a scholar of Jewish mysticism, and who said, if you want to look at the metaphysical roots of anti-Semitism, you have to go into Gnosticism. If you really want to, because then you have, other manifestations of anti-Semitism or anti-Judaism, Christian, and so on. But if you want to look, yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. You want to?
No, continue. So he was saying that anti-Semitism has its roots in this imaginative Gnostic tradition.
So, according to Gershom, first, I think it's completely anachronistic to talk about anti-Semitism for the ancients, right? We talk about something else, but what there is that there is a rebellion against a figure who is symbolically a father figure and a figure of creation, right? So, a figure of world affirmation. And what you have in Gnosticism is a form of world denial, okay? And it goes with the rejection of the Hebrew scripture. When it gets really radical, like in Marcion, what you have is a rejection of the Hebrew scripture and an invention of a Jesus who is not a Jew, okay? So you can imagine how it played in the hands also of Nazism, because the Nazis had to find a way of pleasing the church for political reasons, all the while being anti-Semitic. And so they thought that Aryanizing Jesus was a good idea. So saying Jesus was basically not, quote unquote, Semitic, he was not a Jew, he was an Aryan. There is a trace of Marcionism, you see, in Nazi theology.
And Monsieur Chaouat, also very well identifies that the trans movement is shot through and through with Gnosticism.
Well, if you can, there's a lot of currents within gender ideology that make this concept of gender equatable with the soul, and it is principle and should be principle over the body. And there are arguments within that that says that the body is kind of basically a lie, and the reality is your gender, and your gender should be whatever you want it to be, and access to changing your body to align with this feeling, and they call it a feeling, and it's very circular. It's very circular because it has nothing to do with sex. It's all about gender, which is completely free. But if you can force your body to align with your soul, then that's ultimately what human beings have always wanted to do. At least on the very small earth of our body, we now are lords over it. And our soul, we can impose our will upon the earth of our own bodies.
This is what took me to study Gnosticism. But I was at the dentist and I was reading a magazine, like People or whatever that was. And it was a while ago, because I remember it was the time when Bruce Jenner became Kathleen Jenner. Mm-hmm. And I read the interview with People magazine. And the interview was very striking, because at some point Caitlyn Jenner says, finally, I have become my real self, or something like that, my true self, something like that, right? A form of affirmation of an authenticity which was not there before. And it really sort of resonated for me with this ancient movement called Gnosticism. You know about it a little bit, or
could you sketch it for the audience? Give us the basis on it.
So it's a little tricky. Some people say it does not exist, because there are too many varieties of Gnosticism. So maybe Gnosticism is the wrong word for it. It used to be called heresy. But of course, we're not going to call it heresy today. So they decided, historians call it now heterodoxies, like the Heterodox Academy, right? So, but it's not a Gnostic academy; it's another story. But anyway, and so those heterodox were movements that parted away from Orthodox or Apostolic Christianity in the early centuries of the Church. They have tons of influence, Asian, Middle Eastern, you name it. Geographically, it's quite complicated. But what may be a common feature of all those different so-called heresies of Christianity are a sense that the world is wrong, or that the world is created by a God who was malevolent. It's the concept of the evil demiurge, right? The demiurge, that is the creator of worlds, so of people, the creator, is basically malignant, malevolent, and wanted our misery and affliction. So we have to repudiate this evil God, and we have to find the real God. And the real God is an alien God. It's not a God from this world, because this world is not something, that is good. But the real God is good, entirely good. And therefore we have to find, and the Gnostic is someone who is a Gnostic is someone who thinks that he or she has kept a spark of this alien God. And the spark is called in Greek the pneuma, like a pneumatic, or the word pneuma, which means like a pneumonia, right? So it has to do with the breath, with breathing, right? It's not yet spirit is another translation it's the translation for that, actually. Yeah. And this spirit so when I read Caitlyn Jenner interview, I thought it's very strange. It sounds a little bit like the ancient Gnostic who thought that this embodied self is wrong, so to speak, and that the truth of the self is somewhere else to be found. And so I am not saying that the people who, like Kathleen Jenner, go to transition are Gnostics, but I'm saying that there are some very intriguing similarities in the reasoning, especially the idea of going, of trying to find the real self beneath, before, or beyond. You don't know the location, right? It's impossible to locate because it's not in the brain, it's not in the heart, it's not in the organs, it's not, so you don't really know where it is. So, beyond the created, sexuated, as I call it, body, right?
The idea that your body somehow isn't right and that you can create a perfect self separate from it, that you can mold your body into the right self, thoroughly Gnostic, because your self exists outside of your body somewhere, and your body is holding you down. Now, interestingly enough, Hans Jonas and Professor Chaouat and myself all agree that there is some connection here with existentialism as well. Not so much the Kierkegaardian existentialism as the French version of existentialism. One way to explain it is, so you have this world of darkness and matter, and then you have these different layers. The way I look at it is like this. Cut off all the layers, and you're left with existentialism. That the world is a dark, corrupt place, and there isn't actually any hope, nor is there, all you have is random, absurd free will. Well, now you bring that idea over to sex, that somehow there's something wrong with what are genders. I don't know, the concept of gender has just slipped the leash. It's no longer, see, I felt back in the late 80s, I started hearing gender more and more, and I thought to myself, I don't know. And then eventually in the 90s, people started talking not about their sex, but their gender. So are you male or female? Well, are those genders or sex? You see, it starts to get slippery. After a while, everyone's using the word gender as a replacement for the word sex. And then suddenly the word gender just slips the leash. Now, the reason gender was introduced was because in some forms of gender, there's male, female, and neutral. Because gender comes from language. What's left is the neutral. Now, to get back to Gnosticism. Remember I was talking about the matrix in How We Got Here, number 11. And I point out the whole thing is totally the Gnostic version of Jesus, where Neo really is from another realm and he comes into the bad realm to set them free, to show that, give them the knowledge that will set them free, and that there are higher realms above. Very interesting. And that the realm of the true self isn't the realm of the ucky body down at the bottom. It's what you can become in the presentation of reality just through your choice of will that you receive through special knowledge. And, the people who made that movie, the Wachowskis, were, when they made that film, the Wachowski brothers, are now the Wachowski sisters. And it's no accident that the Matrix is totally Gnostic. Because what Gnosticism says is, you were born in this body, it's a mistake. And when we see this with the whole BIID movement, where people have body identity disorders, so that they don't, body integrity identity disorder, so that they don't, and what these people feel is they were born to be amputated. I cover this in Conceptual Humanity. Something has happened where we've slipped the leash on everything. And I tend to think that globally it happened around the 60s, that the leash broke. And it's taken a while for us to get further away. But now you can have people who will simply say, I feel I'm finally myself, where the concept of identity is the only ruling thing. But the point is, the identity isn't rooted in earth. It's not rooted in biology. It's not rooted in day-to-day experience. It's rooted in this screen stuff that you're looking at right now. It's rooted in, I try to be Byrne, always. I'm Byrne now, which is why I have not created a persona for myself. This is me. If you meet me, you're going to meet the same person. Because I know how easy it is to, my imagination works really well. I could easily create a persona to give you, a mask to wear, which is what persona means. I could give you a mask of myself. The problem is, the mask ends up becoming the self. But our masks these days come to us in philosophical garb, in sociological garb, in ideological garb. And people now think that if I become the thing I imagine, I will be free. No, you won't. You can't be. Because until you take care to understand that matter is a part of this. See, that's why one of the most important parts of the Christian worldview is the resurrection of the body. Because matter is important. In other words, that somehow this stuff will be reassembled. Now, that is mysterious. I don't claim to know it. But the point is, it means that what we have physically is important. Consider your first memories, the things you remember. I remember a scene with snow and a purple kind of sky and an old White House and a dog. Well, here's the thing. All of that was from the physical world. And that helped to make who I am. So matter is really important. Without it, you wouldn't be who you are. So to escape it, in the name of an illusion of what's above you, what's really there, who you really are. You know who you really are? You are who you are right now. There isn't a really somewhere else. Now, there's all the stuff that you're hiding and all the stuff that you're pretending and all of the stuff that, jeepers, if only I could be free to do more or see more, whatever. But nevertheless, you are who you are right now. And you have your choices, which is why one of my heroes his name was John Merrick. He died at the age of 27. His other name is the Elephant Man. And the reason he is my hero is because he was one of the most disfigured, hideous people who ever lived. And he inhabited that body perfectly. Not perfectly, I'm sure he had lots of faults. But the point was that the body was part of who he was. And he inhabited that. And we have to learn to live in the material world. And this digital stuff, that's a temptation. It is something we need to think about. Our relationship to the world. And in these times when everyone's communicating through the internet, I hate to say it, but you need reality. I've been having some sort of conversation with some person who was questioning what Hans Rückemacher's view of reality. And this person kept referring to this text or that text or this writer or that writer. And I was like, you're missing the point. The point is, you need to go outside and touch a tree. If you're, you need to get yourself to Alaska and meet a bear. You need to sit beside someone who is suffering. You need to help real people. You need to think about that traffic in the street. Because otherwise, you don't understand what's going on. If you think what's going on is what's going on the screen, you're not living in this world. You are living in a Gnostic dream. And that Gnostic dream has scorpion tails on it. Meanwhile, the Hydra of social justice is all about the Gnostic dream. It all sees this perfect thing that we can, if we could just get to it. And if we had the special knowledge of race, the special knowledge of gender, the special knowledge of sex, the special knowledge of finances and money, the special knowledge of self. Now, you just need to learn to live in a different sort of a way. You need to be invested in the time that you're living in. You need to be invested in the matter that surrounds you. There is no redemption digitally. Well, I probably could say more. Let's see. So as you can see, Gnosticism is kind of at the root of a lot of history's darker problems. And let me just finish up with recommending you 3 books if you want to pursue some of these things. One would be Hans Jonas, The Gnostic Religion. Another would be Archon Darol. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm just saying it. I'm not going to go back and correct myself. But I'll show you the cover. Darkon Darol's Secret Societies, where it goes through a list of very Gnostic secret societies from the ancient age up until the modern age. And then Nicholas Goodrick-Clarke has a book called The Occult Roots of Nazism, and another book that brings it up from the World War II into the present called The Black Sun. And I recommend these books if you are interested in the effects of Gnosticism upon our lives today. Having said that, I think so much of what we see in our world today is riddled with Gnosticism. From art to geekdom and fandoms to this weird sense of finding yourself, like you're not here. You know, I know where myself is. I'm kind of right here. Am I everything I should be? No. Is anybody? No. Can you improve? Yes. Will you ever get perfect? No. Can you find redemption? I believe so. And that redemption includes the body. In fact, I think you have to go back to the Jewish roots and realize you don't have a soul. You are a soul. Now, as far as eschatology goes, as far as the final things, as far as heaven goes, I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff. That stuff is not, that's kind of beyond me right now. So think on these things, and I will see you again very soon. This is Bern in Tbilisi saying swim against the stream, and a lot of that stream is knowledge, special knowledge, digital knowledge, spiritual knowledge. Swim back upstream. Be an anadromist.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.